Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. So there's this angry, disgusting leftist, purple-haired activist lesbian running around. I can't remember her name, to be honest with you. Not that I care, because I don't. But she's the female soccer star who was on the U.S. soccer team that won the Women's World Cup last year and in 2015. Well, she was back in the news this week because the United States Soccer Federation settled a lawsuit with the U.S. women's national soccer team over a dispute about pay and working conditions not being equal to or greater than the men's team, even though the women's team has won World Cup championships and the men's team hasn't. The women were demanding pay that was equal to or higher than the male players because what possible explanation could there be for working conditions and pay disparities other than the United States Soccer Federation being a bunch of patriarchal, misogynistic oppressors who discriminate based on gender, right? Well, a judge threw out the higher pay part of the lawsuit 7 months ago. But the settlement does give the women's team things the men's team gets, like chartered flights for team travel, private hotel rooms, and other niceties. That all costs money, of course. So even though the settlement didn't increase the players' pay, it did increase the U.S. Soccer Federation's costs. But the truth is, the women were not underpaid to begin with. Contrary to what the leftists believe, money does not grow on trees. It has to be earned. And in the case of World Cup soccer, the prize money has to be based upon economics, not what kind of plumbing a player has. Well, the Men's World Cup brings in far more revenue than the Women's World Cup. In fact, if you look at the percentage of the revenue that goes to prize money, the women are vastly overcompensated compared to the men. The World Cup is a global product. Globally, the Women's World Cup had an estimated viewership of about 500 million people. Last year's Men's World Cup had more than 3.2 billion TV viewers. That's more than 6 times the television audience. The numbers aren't even close. As for revenue, last year's Men's World Cup grossed $4.8 billion in revenue. And they had expenses of $2.2 billion. So FIFA profited $2.6 billion. The FIFA Women's World Cup did less than 0.5% of that. 0.38% to be exact. FIFA's men's income was more than 26,000% more than the women's income. And that is why the prize money differs. And it's also why the men's team can afford better working conditions. It has nothing whatsoever to do with gender discrimination, just like I'm sure the pay and working conditions for the NBA are better than for the WNBA. It's all driven by revenue. But despite that, the women's soccer team announced they will still seek pay parity with the men through the courts. This is despite the fact that the economics don't work the same for the women's team as they do for the men's. And this is a biggie, the men's team gets paid mostly through performance bonuses. The women's team was offered performance bonuses at their last salary negotiations, but the women opted to go with a flat rate pay scale instead. I bet you haven't heard those facts before, but I assure you they're correct. But go ahead and verify them. Sure, you can trust me, but like Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. And if you do verify it, you'll see that the women's soccer team's complaint, just like with pretty much every equal pay for equal work complaint, the facts prove the disparity has absolutely nothing to do with gender. All right, well, that was a short segment, but I got to go. Thanks for listening today to The Mike Bates Show.